logical. Except when you start thinking about security releases, and then it starts to feel like it's going to get complicated. Like I'm thinking about how this version mapper will work with security. Maybe it's not as complicated as I think it will be, but that's the main concern I have right now is just, we're going to come up with a scheme here, and then we're going to have to kind of figure out how it's going to work with security releases as well.
So what is your main concern?
Concerns there are, one is that we don't have a good story when it comes to charts yet for security releases in general. We do have this, we have the CNG images on dev first, then they get published to .com. So that part is already figured out. There's just a bit of unknowns there for me, maybe just because I don't have my head around it completely, how it's all going to fit together and work.
So the charts part is basically set up the same way the omnibus is. So you can replace omnibus with charts in whichever explanation you want, and it works exactly the same. So from that side, nothing should be problematic there. What can be problematic is possible version conflicts. So if we go down the route of what we discussed here with VersionMapper, if we have someone merge something and that gets tagged, and then we have a security merge come in and someone tags a security version, which version do they tag? And do they stop the next version from bumping on public? So for example, if someone just merged something in, how do we ensure that version 1.2.1 that was previous is working with version 1.2.2, which is security, and then working with version 1.2.3 that is not security, it's in public. I don't know how to explain this better, actually. There is a possibility for a tag clash that I see already. I just don't know.
It's already there. It's the problem that every component suffer every month when there's a security release. They have to do tag freezing on public because they tag in advance because they are not integrated with the tooling. So they have to pre-tag the security fixes, and so they are in this frozen state.
Yeah.
This still brings us to the idea that we should drop Semver because we don't need it. It's a problem. And
yeah,
but I think I was not really scared by this with the security release, but to another details, which is we release security fixes, which is the latest known tagged version plus only security fixes. This doesn't play well in the auto-deploy world because it's a kind of stop the world and just do security fixes. Yep. We can, because my idea was that with the work that Robert and Myra are doing, we can simply move to the private repo, and instead of publishing the chart images on a public registry, we publish them on a private one with the credentials. So we can use the new images and things like that, and everything is more or less like the previous one. But my idea was that we were still picking the latest development plus the fixes. But this will end up that when the day of the release comes, we never run that commit set, that version of GitLab in production.
We will never run that. That is true. And I don't know, both Johns, do you understand what Alessio and I are talking about? Like, I know because I'm participating in security development migration. So I know exactly what he's talking about.
I would like to think that I do.
Okay, just confirming. Alessio, the thing where I think this is not going to be that big of a deal for this process specifically is that, yes, you're right. It's never going to be that commit running in production, but that is the case right now, even. Because even with the stop the world thing, auto deploy is not stopping. So that continues. Right. So we are back into the same state. So with the work that is being done with the security development, security releases, backporting is what's going to be the point here, right? Like security releases are always going to go into the auto deploy regardless of the self-managed release for .com, and then we'll have a way to backport things into a stable branch, and then with a click or command tag. So that part I would basically remove from this discussion, because at that point we can tag whatever version we decide, whatever version scheme we decide at that moment.
Okay.
So I'm not concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the stop the world part, because if something gets tagged and we need to skip a tag, there is a big chance that even if we empower all of the other components to tag independently and skip that security tag, there is a possibility of that leaking, because it's incremental, right? Like it goes incrementally, which means that we will need to guard against that, which is a business I don't want to go into.
I think we should just drop, or not drop. Yeah, let's say drop. We should add the SHA at the end of whatever tag we do. So they are no longer sequential. This will solve all of our problems. Then you have the SHA, you still have a point in time, and you can do whatever you need. And you have the measure and minor if you want to keep them, because I'm not really inclined to keep all of them, but let's say we keep them. Then you have this rough idea of where you are in the history, because it's still 12.5, but then there's a SHA. I mean, it's somewhere in 12.5 development. So
if we take a look at the schema that was written in the previous call, and we look bullet point 4AI3, so Gitally, I'm highlighting it right now. This would not be 1 to 12, or rather this would be the final tagged version, but we would be tagging it on top of 1 to 12 and then SHA, for example. It's not proper somewhere. It still gives you an idea of what we are working towards, and the ABCD is the SHA that we are tagging on top, which means we kind of fix the clash problem as well. Not really, because they can still push the tag and expose previous versions.
I think I really like the idea of dropping tags. Like, I know it's going to be trouble for Gitally, but maybe we should talk to the Gitally team.
This is not only Gitally, Jarv, this is all.
Yeah.
But I thought it was Gitally more than the others, just because they're more frequently releasing.
They're more active, yes.
Care more about their change log and things like that.
Yeah. By the way, today we merged the fix that in the admin panel will show you an up-to-date Gitally, even if it's not tagged. Just if the SHA matches, it would show as an up-to-date, so that we untangle the things of tagging. But yeah, they do something like this today. It's not dot, but it's kind of number of commits you are away from the real tag. Then there's a G, which stands for Git, and then you have the SHA. This is what they do. But okay, 12 is not a good one. 13, for example, 13 means you are 13 commits away from that tag.
We have that in Omnibus as well if you want to use that. We have the exact same thing if we need it.
Yeah, because it get describe minus tag, I think.
Yeah.
So this is what they are using. I think that we should do something like this. You are not allowed to tag the minor. It's release tool business.
That's actually an interesting idea. So you're always going towards .0.
Yeah.
You're always going towards 0 of the next one, and then we can selectively pick commits that are newer and tag them independently from. That's actually an interesting idea.
Yeah, we kind of keep the count. We know which is the last things that we tagged, and we say, now we are going to build something. But this will break that idea that we had, which is team tags themselves what they want, and then we pick up the tag. If we go this route, we are in the business where we say, we really want to do continuous delivery, so we take the, let's say, latest master, unless you bumped, let's say, the version file. We can, because we may consider that we want to have a compatibility mechanism. So Pages, Gisali, all of them have a version file when they just write down the version. So you bump 1.3.0, and then if we don't know if it's compatible, maybe we stop and say, okay, we pick the last thing on the 1.2, for instance. But this will solve the problem of sequential tagging.
All right, I think I need to have this in my head for a bit longer. Let's rope this back into the discussion about how are we migrating components to Kubernetes and see how this fits. So previous time we talked about a possible opportunity for us to not do any work and have the platform auto-upgrade itself. So every time developers merge something into master, it would be picked by the platform and images would be replaced. And if necessary, charts would be replaced independently. With the moving part of this version mapper as well, this is becoming impossibly complex system. And I think this is not going to happen anytime soon. It's just not possible for us to do that amount of work and be online, I guess. That's the biggest thing.
Why, sorry, Mary, why is the VersionMapper complex? Or why do you think, just because it touches so many different things?
It touches so many different things. It has a possibility of touching so many different tools, and even worse, it touches so many people.
Yeah, I see that.
And everyone has an idea of what does it mean to do a release, how to write a changelog, how the tooling around it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can decide to prescribe a system to them. It's just that migrating them to the system is possibly a lot of work as well.
Right. I mean, I see the big impact will be to Omnibus and potentially charts, but to GitLab components, I don't know. Like, if we don't care whether we're taking a tag or a SHA, then it's not much different than what we have now, where we're updating versions in the GitLab code base, where we're updating version files, right? It's just moving that update to this central YAML.
Yeah, but then we still have to propagate this back to Rails, for instance, because Rails clone its own Gisali version and perform tests based on that. So part of the system are still designed to.
Yeah, but we could keep this in lockstep. I mean, like the version files in Rails, right, could be kept in sync with this file. Now, of course, that is not ideal.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
I mean, we might need to think about a different system, because there is another thing that I didn't mention to try to prevent complexity, but we've trained the whole community that we still have people who are installing from source. So what they need to do is just pull that one repository and they'll get all the versions. If we do that, we need to think of another system that will get them those versions. And then we are back to the story you had on Friday about services, about the version service, which is something we would like to avoid.
But couldn't we just keep these version bumps in lockstep? I mean, it's not ideal, but not all component versions are represented in the version files on GitLab anyway. Like registry version, right, is not, I don't think it's represented
No,
at
it's
all.
not.
No.
So I think, you know, for the versions that are, maybe we
But
just
the
keep them
registry is
amongst
the
them.
exception.
Yeah, you're right. I can't think of any other service off the top
But
of
why
my
don't
head.
we keep the GitLab as a source of truth? Because it's already there, right? So all the versions are already there. Why don't we use that one?
Because what would we need to do? We would need to like get release tools to clone this humongous project that keeps moving. And we'll have to like, there are so many problems that are like flooding to my head right now that I would like avoid using GitLab as a source, like GitLab Rails as a source of truth for anything. Like
Okay.
I mean,
there is a bit
yeah.
of a weird dependency there where we say that GitLab Rails is a source of truth for everything, but it's one of the components that makes up a bigger ecosystem. So if Omnibus came first or came in time, that should have been our source of truth to begin with, and not Rails.
Yeah, but now we have charts that are aside from Omnibus. So the thing could be
It's the same. It's the same. They're encompassing the whole ecosystem that we have built. So whether you call it charts or Omnibus, it doesn't matter. They both need to draw from a source of truth that is on a higher level than GitLab Rails, in my opinion.
Yeah. I got what you mean. This will it's fine, but this will mean that then also GitLab Rails needs to check that source.
Yeah.
Because it needs those information for source installation, for running tests, for whatever. So it's a dependency that we can move to the upper level and say release tools or whatever, and having this single source of truth. But there's also an opportunity. Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. I just saying, like, I'm a fan of just ripping it out. I mean, because we can't expect, we're going to be building more services, and we're not going to be adding them to the, you know, create a new, like step one, create a new service, create a version file, and get that.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like,
I agree.
so why don't we just say, let's just do it? You know, let's get rid of the version files, update the docs, and it's going to be a lot easier. If we do need to migrate to something else, it's going to be a lot easier to do it this way than to maintain the source of truth in GitLab.
GitLab Rails, yeah. I agree. I'm not a fan of GitLab Rails being the source of truth because it's only one part of a bigger piece.
Or we keep it as the source of truth for published versions so that we would only update it. We would keep it in sync for when we publish, but nothing more, you know, or something like that. I don't know.
One idea that we had when we were discussing auto deployment of component was that we just write master in all of the version file on master, which was the biggest change. Okay, so it's always from master, so you can spot error in advance because the problem is that only Gitly has real end-to-end tests, so it would be the only one with this kind of security mechanism. And then when you release, you write there the version that you were using for that release because it's the. But then you lose the idea that SHA in the Rails is a point in time where you can just clone there and run the same tests, and it will not have the same result because if it's pointing to master Gitly, tomorrow there will be another master Gitly.
We're gonna have, I mean, we're gonna have a release where Rails stays the same and Gitly changes, right? And as we release more frequently, it's bound to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, but for us, but we don't run 12.5. For the customer, when we package and release the product, it will be Gitly 12.5.1. Even if it's just changed, if it's changed Gitly, it will be 12.5.1, even if the Rails part is the same. Because it's a version of the package.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
but then it means definitely that we need to move away from this, because we say it's a version of the package, it's a version of the charts, it's whatever, it's a version of GitLab product. Then it makes way more sense for this to propagate down rather than up from GitLab Rails.
Yeah, but I do agree. But with the introduction of the charts, it's a perfect example, because we don't want to have in chart the same logic and the same version and committee that we have on Omnibus. This is we are building a hierarchy, and now we need something on top of that that has the truth, which is fine. I mean, it's okay, but it's more something that we need for our own case than what we actually need for releasing the product.
I mean, I don't understand. Like, we need for our own case. We need for our own case because we can't duplicate this code if we add yet another packaging and release method.
Yeah, right.
Right.
No,
like
the idea. Sorry.
No, continue.
But my idea was that in the time frame of a regular release, so let's say 1 month we do a monthly release, a patch release, and a security release. So we have 3 releases a month. Let's say 4, so one each week. Okay, so it's easier. We don't do only 4 auto-deploy releases. So our own case, and I mean running GitLab.com, means that we will end up deploying multiple times a day, even packages where only registry changes, only gitali changes, only pages changes, because it can happen. And my impression here is that we don't want to go down the route of tracking all those things as a regular packages, because as soon as
for
we
auto-deploy, no.
Yeah, that's the point. So
auto-deploy, no.
Having this master source of truth that collects every versions and everything, it's useful for auto-deploy when you want to know, right now I have to build something, which version should I pick today in this moment? But it's less needed for a monthly release or a patch release when things are more stable. Because it's the thing that you do that week, and it's gonna be packaged. We will have a tag in the end which tells you exactly what was in that package.
I'm not sure if we're like, maybe we should kind of like go off and think about this a bit more and then come back, because it feels like we're kind of talking in circles.
Yeah. I'm more curious to hear, how do we tie this back into our migration? Because taking on this project definitely means postponing the work we need to do with Kubernetes. And it is becoming more and more apparent to me that we can't migrate the rest of the services without tackling this. And I want to know and hear from the 3 of you whether there is a way for us to continue working on that in parallel with this, rather than doing the stop, the migration stop to address this first.
There's probably some work we can do in parallel. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done for Sidekick specifically about how we're going to, architect the cluster and how it's going to run exactly. And there's probably some charts work that we're going to have to do. But as far as ensuring that what we have running on GitLab.com maps to exactly what we were releasing for Omnibus, including security releases and how it fits into that process. I think, we obviously need to work that out still.
I have a bunch of issues in the Sidekick epic that are mostly discovery issues that we could try to pull while we try to figure this exact problem out. That way we're not stopped, but at least we know exactly what we should be looking forward to when we get to the step of migrating Sidekick.
If nothing else, I mean, we can use pre-prod and possibly even, have a cluster that we can, or have the ability to shut it down when we want to use pre-prod for something important, right? It's just a matter of ensuring that Sidekick isn't picking up jobs in the cluster, and that would allow us to test in parallel, and without affecting staging.
I guess the one worry I have is if we choose to go down the process of building VersionMappers, like how long is that going to take though? Or where that's going to take so long that we don't end up getting to Kubernetes anytime in 2020.
But I think
But
we
this
can,
is Kubernetes,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Jared, sorry, interrupted you.
Well, the amount of tools that we need to touch to make all of this work is what worries me.
I think where we end up is going to be using a tagged version of charts for deployment. How we get that tagged version and the process for tagging it, I think, is what we're talking about here. I think we all sort of agree that I think where we want to end up is that we're just going to bump the Helm version in k8s workloads, which is going to have the appropriate subcomponent versions. So assuming that, if that's the assumption, we can definitely get started on the Sidekick and Kubernetes work, because we can just test with, whatever version is the latest Helm chart release.
Yeah, I do agree with Jarv here, because if we assume that we already have solved this, we are not ready to start migrating. So we have so many things that we still have to figure out on the infrastructural side that, yeah, taking the assumption that it's just a matter of bumping the Helm chart version, I think it's a good one, because it's where we want to end up with the release process. Top of my mind, I was thinking about the job trace problem that we had last week when we removed the NFS. And I think this is clashing with our plan in general, because that's something that we cannot remove from production. So we still need the NFS. So do we know if there is some active development?
No.
We don't know, or
there is no active development.
Okay.
Because that's no one's problem.
But that's CI traces, which is not related to Sidekick, right? And
yeah, it is, because Sidekick is uploading.
Oh,
that's the problem. It's asynchronous.
I thought it was only. Oh, right. It's
yeah,
still specific, but we have the same problem for pages, right? These are specific queues.
Pages is out of scope completely.
So can we just
Pages is migrating
queues?
to API.
Yeah.
We started
Pages is
stuff.
being re-architected as we speak to completely work differently. So Pages we should ignore for now. What I'm suggesting, and what I suggested at the beginning of the Sidekick discussion, is that we should look for the queues that have the least impact and that have no need for shared storage. There are queues, there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
That we can do without actually having to depend on NFS. What we should do during this investigation, though, is expose the ones that do have a dependency, because that will allow us to parallelize some of the work. Given that, as far as I know, no one is actually working on this, the sooner we expose those properly with the data of, hey, this is actually not working on whatever environment we have, not all the epics that we have going on, but the actual work done where we can provide some evidence that this is working or not working. If we have that, we can find a way to prioritize that, or rather, I can find a way to prioritize that while we work on the other things. That was the idea all along, by the way. Like I mentioned it a couple of times. We want to start with a queue that we know has no problems with shared storage, and then expose it slowly.
Okay.
All right. So I don't want to take up more of our time. So basically, what did we conclude here? Actually, who wants to repeat this?
I think it would be helpful if there was a single person driving this new architecture for handling releases, because I would prefer not to think about it until it's a little bit more fleshed out, or I can be the one who thinks about it and comes up with something, but it's going to consume a lot of time, whoever has to work on it. So who do you think, Maren, should be driving it?
Well, I know absolutely I shouldn't. Like that is for absolutely certain.
And like, do you think, I mean, we can discuss this in December, but I have a feeling we're not going to make any significant changes in December, right?
Not like we have one significant change that is pending anyway. We cannot do two. Moving security development to .com is going to be our big kick item for December.
So maybe we just push this out then and like we work on January. The Kubernetes stuff and we push this out until January so we can focus on other things.
All right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask Alessio to take these two recordings from Friday, from today, and go through it and compare with the notes we have in the doc, and convert that inside of the Epic 113. So the reordering pipelines, like the discussion that we had here, compare it with what is written in the Epic already, and write up a new iteration proposal or whatever you want to call it, so that we don't lose this discussion, because we're going to have to revisit it anyway basically come January. All of these things are dependent, but not like super directly, as in like none is going to block, but at some point when they converge, they're going to block everything. I guess Jarvan Skarbek, the two of you need to continue driving the Sidekick Epic. So who is going to be responsible for driving the whole thing? Sidekick, I mean, because there are sub points there, right? Like even in the Sidekick migration, there are sub points. One point is thinking about like how are we gonna partition the Sidekick queues, like which ones are we gonna select, all of that thing, and then the other part is which environments and how are we gonna test this? Like those are two big things within one epic to be done. So who wants to tackle what, or do we want to have someone decide that?
I'd be willing to tackle the Sidekick effort as much as I can.
That sounds fine to me too. I mean, I definitely want to work on it. So, Skarbek, do you want to try to lead it, and then, you know, we can just see how it goes?
Sure.
And if you feel like you're not free enough to work to lead it, then we can come back and figure out something else. Like, you know, but
you and I could work together to figure that out.
I think we can pretty much split it 50-50, and we can just put your name on it so that when it goes south, you know, I can go hide in the corner. No, I'm kidding. Let's just work on it together, and maybe we can, in addition to this meeting, maybe we can do a kickoff meeting. Like, I don't know, do a kickoff meeting with the two of us just to kind of plan it out.
Yeah. Okay. I tried to supplement our epic with as much stuff that I could think of last week. or the week before last, I guess. So we could revisit what those issues are and figure out what I'm missing.
Okay. Let's do a kickoff meeting tomorrow then.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
schedule something.
Great.